And I was working a bar and come out to empty trash. This guy had kicked out earlier. They had come back and this dude went and got a kitchen knife, bro. Came at me with a kitchen knife. And I go to pull my blade. I had a cold steel. And I go to open it and it falls out of my hand, bro, with the opening motion, you know? But once I drop it, I don't have time to pick it up, right? I'm getting stuck. And so he comes at me. So I back out and I hit his hand and I hit him with a cross at the same time. Right? I pop, pop. It hit him. He dropped instantly.
The average rapper the right to remain silent. Competition.
Welcome back to FURYCAST. On today's show, he's a JKD, rapid assault tactics, MMA, all-around good guy. Very interesting story, and I'm proud to have him on the show today. Please welcome on FURYCAST, Mr. Michael VanBeek.
Brother, thank you for having me on, man. Thank you for having me on. Love this Fury stuff, brother. I did go back, check out some of your podcasts. Good stuff, man. You have some good quality people on. Appreciate you. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great here in, I won't say sunny, but I'll say very hot and humid Houston, Texas. You're out there. Tell the good people where you're at.
We're up in Northwest Indiana. I left Illinois, Chicago area, kind of came out here to Indiana. Nice place to settle down at. You know what I mean?
So for the people that may not be familiar with you, take 2 minutes and give them the nutshell of who you are and what you do.
Yeah, my name is Mike VanBeek. I'm a counterbalance specialist. I came up through the Taekwondo ranks, got a black belt in that, did all the things. I have a story inside of a story like everybody does. I'm no different than anybody else. But my martial arts career looks like that, right? Kid training, martial arts, traditional martial arts. I got into JKD and pursued that heavily. And then once you get into JKD, that's the heart, and the veins are everything else. The jujitsu, the kali, the weapons, the stick, the gun, if you're a JKD person. And so that's why I've evolved myself in today. And I've been one of the fortunate people who's been able to make a living at this. I have a school, I have locations throughout the country, representatives and so forth. So I'm very fortunate about that. It's hard to do. It just is. You can be one of the best martial artists in the world. Making a living at it, it is difficult.
Absolutely. I can attest to that. And I was a rapper, filmmaker, and a martial arts gym owner. All those are really hard to to turn into a career. If the 12-year-old version of me, if I just wanted to be a nurse, I think that would have been a much financially more a better choice. But let's go back in your childhood. Where did you grow up, and what was your childhood like?
Well, I grew up in a suburb of Chicago called Chicago Heights.
Is that South Chicago, or where is that?
Yeah, Chicago, South Chicago. It's the I refer to it. There's an expressway that runs south on Chicago called 394. I refer to it as like the groin of Chicago. It's a mess all the way down. You have to go pretty far south to get out of a place that's not, seen some rough times. So that's where I'm from. My first memory is of my father leaving. It was a disastrous fight between him and my mother. And that's how my second book starts off, with that very first memory. And because the second book is entitled Becoming Violent. And that was my first step into that direction, was having my father leave as my first memory. And so subsequently, fast forward through some hard times. And my mother got remarried when I was probably in the second grade. And so I had a stepdad who really didn't know how to dad too much. He's a good dude, really awesome man. But you know what I mean? Didn't know how to dad too much. So I really didn't have a masculine arc within my life. There wasn't. My mother had 5 sisters. I now had 2 sisters. Then my first school out of the ghetto into suburban life when my mother remarried. Really wasn't suburban life. It was still Chicago Heights. But at least there was a mom and a dad, and there's a house. We can get a dog and so forth. I go right into special ed in 1977. And special ed in the 70s wasn't like somebody was coming to the room with a, would you go to prom with me? Or it was, you know what I mean?
Oh, I know.
Every boy is going to work his running the ladder to get up the hierarchy of the playground king through the special ed kids. You know what I mean? That's how it's. And and because I didn't have my father worked afternoons. I never seen him except on the weekends. And then it was kind of like, just do your chores kind of thing. And so I didn't have this like, hey boy, fix your aim. this is not who your picture ain't. You're okay. Yeah, I didn't have this reassurance. And so I became very, as a result of these overlapping structural issues, I developed a poor self-image of myself. Was beta in every sense of the word. I had no other way out. I was not pulled from this sense of anything else. And so and to handle the effects of being in special ed in 1977, my mother enrolled me in a martial arts class, circa 1979-ish. You know, my instructor looked like Louis Gossett Jr. from Officer and a Gentleman, if you're old enough to know this movie. And he carried the role very well. You know, he was like, oh yeah, it was really a hard, old school karate. And I was every bit as scared of this guy. But martial arts became the lighthouse in the fog of my life, where the people who didn't know I was in special ed, they didn't know me like that. I was equal to them. And I didn't let these people know that either. It was a place that I could kind of cocoon and foster a part of me that had been previously undeveloped. Unconsciously doing this, of course, I'm not like masterminding the rise of a masculine personality, but martial arts was doing that, giving me a place that nobody else knew me. And so I pursued that all the way on. I wound up getting out of special ed in high school, dropping out of martial arts because hanging out with the boys, becoming a bass player in a fictitious band that you were in, it really wasn't going to go anywhere. But you're in high school, so that's what you do. You smoke a lot of weed, you drink a lot of beer, you go to keggers, you make a lot of bad decisions. And so that was that. Graduated in lower half of my high school. It wasn't, nothing big deal. But something happened that I just started becoming introverted in thinking, kind of immersion in my own introspection, and got into Eastern philosophy, religion, started back in the martial arts. I've been in Taekwondo that whole scattered time through high school, and wound up getting a black belt, going out for the nationals and the Olympics in the early 90s. And I had followed this guy in Black Belt magazine called Paul Vunak for a long time. And this dude, I seen some video of him, and he had this Filipino, I guess, martial arts uniform on. And so he looked like a waiter at a Southside Chicago restaurant. Those uniforms, they were cut in half. And so he was doing this amazing things with these sticks. And I seen him put a motorcycle helmet on a guy and just destroy the shield on it. And I was like, what? It was something different than I had seen before. It was someone who wasn't doing the blocks and the kung fus and the karates and the traditional stuff. And he was doing Bruce Lee's thing. And I was like, what? So I went out and seen a seminar he was at and kept in touch with him, and met a guy named, one of his instructors named Deanne Ricardo from Chicago, and started up that food chain. And then met a guy named Thomas Cruz, who was Paul's right-hand man. Stayed with him for years, and then just played with Paul for 20-something years. Caught a fire case of addiction, I did. And so I smoked a shit ton of crack cocaine over a decade and put myself in positions that logic and reason defy. And so I collected money for people who let money out. And that's how I got my money. I fought in the streets for money. I was homeless. And I got to apply martial arts at a level that I don't think most people get to apply that at, nor are they faced with such a thing called violence. They're always training with people. And so I had to go through all that, and it changed my perception of everything I had been taught previously, even the Vunak stuff. And I thought I thought was legit, and I'm not saying it's not, but it just seemed there's something needs to be added to this. Something's not right. There's a translation that's off here in the training and in the drilling. And so when I had gotten sober, I went on this pathway to explain this missing element, and called it counterviolence. That everybody's used to doing martial arts, but no one's fighting. They're always fighting martial artists and calling it self-defense. They're fighting the same thing that they're doing. A Wing Chun person is not fighting someone from the street. He's fighting another Wing Chun person. Jiu-jitsu is the same way. Everything's the same way. Boxing is the same way. Wrestling is the same way. And then what the street said is, this is not the same way. Not at all. Not even close. You could say to somebody that that NASCAR and Formula One are the same, and they'll laugh at you. The guy said, "Well, they're both driving, man." And they're like, "Well, I mean, okay, okay, but they're not at all the same, you know." Um, and so that's how I saw it. And I was like, there was nothing that prepared me for violence in the prior to training, especially after the violence happened. Now what? Your heart's racing, you're cut, you're bleeding, you may have pissed your pants. You don't know, right? Do you run? Do you hide? Do you call the police? What do you do? All these things. And so none of this was, I came out of that lucky to be alive, being a resident of Cook County Jail, doing time in, 15 different local police stations, spending weekends here, doing this, living on the streets, man. It just, it was no good. And, the things that put me into the knowledge base that I have about violence were my decisions. I don't like to tell them as cool stories because they're not. They're stories that put me in there because I was an idiot and I was an addict. And that's what I did. And that wasn't cool. But I knew, but now I know what's coming for you. I know what's coming for you, right? And if you're a hunter, bro, and you're hunting an animal, and you said, well, you get to pick your weapon, and you got a spear, a gun, you have a slingshot, you have a rifle, you have a bow and arrow, there's some foul language, staffs, and nunchucks, what would be your weapon? And you would say logically, well, it depends upon what I'm hunting. Absolutely. And so when you take that back to the martial arts and say, you're hunting jujitsu people, you think the guy raping your wife is doing a single leg on you? You think that's what's happening? Okay, bro. And I'm not saying don't train that, right? I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that understand in a martial arts perspective, we have traditional, we have all these ranges of martial arts. But what my personal life brought into that martial arts life was that context determines content. So the context in which you live your life, that I lived my life, determined the content of what I needed to survive. And so if you collect money for a living, if you hire and fire people for a living, if you do these things, it sets up the reason people would come at you. It sets up the modus operandi of violence. And so these are the things I came out of that time with that were staunchly different than from when I went into it. And so it was the addiction and life on the streets that on a personal level tore the masculine necessities from me. And articulating all of that is what led me to the knowledge base that allowed me to write my first book called War Room, Pound Around's Playbook. It was an insider trading look at violence from the jail cell, from the streets, from this dude, I'm going to stab you. And I flip out my knife and I drop it, and he's coming at me, there's no one there. When you figure out the risk to reward ratio that enters your psyche in the moment of these things, now you realize why you don't see those spinning heel hook kicks and fancy dancy, because the risk to reward ratio, the return on investment just doesn't exist in some of those things. And the process by which you find the content with the least risk versus reward ratio, highest return on investment into the context of your life is the process of learning personal protection.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. That's you said so much that I'm trying to process because and maybe you can help me with this, because so much of your story is identical to my story. And so much of my story I've never shared. And I'm becoming emotional because you probably know this. When you start telling people you were in special ed, I was in special ed in the early 80s. I was dyslexic, had a lot of trouble reading. Not only were you bullied, treated poorly as a kid, I noticed as an adult, if I told people that, they looked at me differently. Adults, in my early 20s. So in my early 20s, I quit telling my story. Just because I would have people kind of cock their head and look at you, and that cock your head, look at you says, oh, you're different from me. You're, I'm going to put you in this compartment now. And so I quit telling my story, and I've never spoke about it publicly. But as a young man who didn't have a father in the house, who didn't have uncles to teach him, how to be a man, how to walk with excellence, all these things, and then be thrust into something like special ed that was basically a nightmare, super hard to get out of. The only way I got out of it is we moved from Louisiana to California, and I had to test into the California system. And of course, I tested in the regular classes. I go through that, didn't really have money for martial arts, always super into martial arts. So I had to like piece together what I thought manhood was on my own. You're going to do that completely unsuccessfully. You tell me if you think I'm wrong, but to not have that was extremely challenging. And then coupled with like a lot of bouts of extreme poverty, homelessness. We were in homeless shelters for a period of time. A lot of things I don't think a lot of teenagers went through. And I think maybe that molded a lot of my decisions early, as a teenager being in a homeless shelter and seeing most people there because of addiction, some people there because of abuse, a lot of people there because of both of these things together, abuse and drug addiction. I think that really molded my decisions to stay away from drugs. So that was a positive. And, the uncles I did have were selling drugs in the penitentiary, things like that. So it seemed like a thing to stay away from. How did you put together what it was like to be a man in the conditions you came from?
It's like, it's a trial and error. For me, it was a process. There's a saying of being reborn. For me, it was a process of like literally like peeking my head out of the womb a little bit at a time. And most of it was by necessity. It was because when my father left, I shrunk into this isolated position of, boy, quiet down. There's some, right. They used to cut up food and put it on a deli for snacks, try to get you to buy the thing. Mm-hmm. And so my mom would buy grapes for us to eat walking around the store as we would go back and forth snagging on the thing to eat. Right. So we'd go to somebody's house and it was like, just sit there and keep your mouth shut. Somebody, there's always this thing that you just told it as a boy, sit there, shut your mouth. I don't know where dad's at for years. Right. Don't have one. And then the new dad, he's a great guy, amazing human being. Right. But his dad was the same way. He's only going to read. Right. And so it was about just shutting your mouth and learn how to survive. Learn how to survive. Somebody asks you a question, don't speak unless you're spoken to. If you see an opening, take it. Life lesson-ish. And so I wasn't this stand-up, chargeful, go get it. Right. And I think when you look even in siblings, perhaps my older sister had a different thing. Right. I know friends, I have martial arts friends who've gone and have shared a lot that we have and became very aggro about it.
Same here.
Fuck you and everybody around you.
Yeah. I've seen people go it's amazing how siblings will take it differently.
Yeah. I see that as a teacher. When you bring siblings in, there's one will, one skill, one soft, one hard, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so for me personally, this quest of, it wasn't my choice to seek out masculinity. The man I am today is built by necessity alone.
You think that still exists? You think young men today still need to? Because you think it'll destroy them if they don't, in a way that, like, there was no option for you and I. I'm maybe a few years behind you. I'm early 80s as a kid. You're mid 70s. If you didn't figure it out, it was going to break you. It was going to destroy you. Do you think it's the same for kids today?
No, I think there's a safety net. And I'm not saying that across the board, because obviously there's kids in poverty. Obviously there's kids on the street. Yeah. I work in the addiction field at the state level. And so I'm very well aware of what's out there, And so for those people, those obstacles still exist. And I think that there's probably, anyway, when you're sitting in the place with all these people, you see the possibility is there, right? Yeah. the lack of influence and push to it is not. You know, it's like, oh, you know, when I was on the streets, they would say, oh, that guy, he could have been somebody. He could have been, because I was an MMA fighter, you know, in that time, and I was in the cage, and, you know, that was when MMA first started, and you know what I mean? And so that's what they said about me. And it was the same thing with children today. It's like I see kids and I come in here and, you know, you got to look at me and go, they don't have a necessity.
Yeah.
There's no one telling. Look at. I could cut the grass on the riding lawnmower, son, but I want you to walk up and down this thing with the push mower and push it. No headphones, no nothing, and I want you to get inside your head, because this is your own meditation time, right? And doing those chores as a boy, that's what was the most rewarding thing for me. Being forced to do the chores, because within the chores, I got to think, and I got to look inside my head, and I got to look at the world, and I got to dissect things. If I was just given a tablet and the earphone, man, I'd never know me. I never know the things I know now about me. And yes, I put myself in positions whereby if you don't stand up, you will die, boy. You will die.
Yeah.
You will straight up die. You are in Inglewood in the basement, and all these people here, you're the only white dude, and they're all throwing down, training for fighting, and all doing some weird shit. And you're over here smoking crack with this prostitute. You better figure some shit out, boy. You're about to, you know what I mean? And so, yeah. You realize at that point about the things about masculinity that people mistake for masculinity. Standing up for yourself is not toxic. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean fighting. Normally, if you teach your boy how to stand up for himself, he won't have to fight.
Typically, yeah.
Right, because violence, as I found out, qualifies its victims, right? Qualifies its victims.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not gonna pick on some big ass, you know what I'm saying? Swole looking, he can handle himself because I seen him in the pen, dude. No, I'm gonna pick on the least of these, the weaker, the ones I can disorientate. I have a saying in my business that I look at for in terms of development of young men as well, and that is that what makes you a good person makes you a great victim. And if you don't train the lion to protect the lamb, you'll learn this firsthand.
Well, speak on that a little bit.
That you have to understand that that you can be in both places. You can be a man that cries about what the fuck he believes in, and you can stand up for yourself in the same spot. You can be the same person, right? So yes, I don't want to lose this, and please don't hurt me. But if you don't train the lion to carry that desire through, you have no will and you have only skill. No will, no skill. Will is the vehicle that carries the skill. Without it, you will die. Your bloodline will be shamed. Stand up for it. Stand up for your worth. I couldn't do that because I saw myself as a failure. So the masculinity pulled me up out of myself and pulled me from the streets and said, you were made for more than this. Man the fuck up. Yeah. And so here I am now, 13 years later, talking to you.
And I'm glad you are.
Amen, brother.
Now coming from a family that several members have had drug issues, you know, drug addicts, crackheads, however you want to put it. How did you go down that path? What do you think? I'm sure you have thought about it, but what do you think set you on that road?
To addiction?
Yeah, you think it was
Oh, I think it's the same thing. If you look at the broadest brush that paints all of those issues together, I think you will find poor sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
Poor sense of self. So every remaking story uses NLP or uses some therapeutic device to change the self-portrait you made of yourself. The self-portrait you allowed, how you thought everybody else saw you as your own self-portrait. Mm-hmm. The second half of life is when you paint this own picture for yourself. Yes, this was me standing up for me, and my evolution is saying, Michael, stand up for yourself and paint your own picture. Stop letting everybody else, and they're not even doing it. It's my illusion of what they think of me. It's probably not even real. Right? The person doesn't even care about me, but yet I've projected my image on them back at me, and I'm a loser, and I'm doing this wrong, and I'm meant to be a failure, and I'm a mistake, and poor me. Shut the fuck up, man. Shh. Just sit for a minute, you know? This is what my business is called, focus, actually. For that reason, sit, Mike, focus. It's okay. You're going to be okay. Man
be
up.
Calm, breathe.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And the same thing as I have to do now, because now when you go, you take a swing. Sometimes you swing too hard, brother. You go the other way, you know. And now I think there was a period where everybody I thought was bullying me, and I have a thing with bullies because I grew up in special ed, picked on, blah blah blah, right? And people now are going, Mike, it's just business. Wait, you're just using that term so that you could cheat me and be a bully and do all these things. And so I started seeing it bullying at all different levels, and I started going, no one's, I'm going to stand up for me. And I started getting very aggro about everything. You know, I went from being so beta passive to being so aggressive. And I thought that it didn't, I didn't think being aggressive equaled being a man. But I was so mad at myself for not standing up for myself that no one was going to do that ever again. And so how dare you
Exactly.
ask?
I know exactly what you mean. You mad at yourself, mad at the people that were supposed to stand up for you and didn't. So I'm going to compensate now, and you end up overcompensating. I've done that before, probably for decades.
Right. I've had sponsors and mentors, and I remember talking to Bunak and on the phone, and I'm telling him I'm losing my shit, and he says, Mike, I'm gonna come. I'm sending you, stay in the house, don't go outside the house, right? Because then people like us, we're gonna wind up in jail. We're gonna make a bad decision. We're gonna pull someone out of a car or something. Our road can go down a different way, right? So instead he says, Mike, I'm gonna send you $500. Come see me. There's a Western Union. This is in the 90s, right? So there's a Western Union waiting $500. I buy a plane ticket. I go out to LA. We spend 5-6 days together, hang out. And in that time, he was always very Carlos Castaneda, very, you know what I mean? Lesson inside of a lesson, inside of a stalking kind of, And so it was very cool. It was a very telling time. But, during that time, I realized I gave away my need. And it caused me to lose the best ability to make my own decisions, And so a lot of the things, like your life, like my life, and like a lot of other people's life, we have this natural happenstance of, like an old kung fu movie where, like Danielson, he goes through these trying times. His mom's moving. Now everybody look at Danielson and says, he's kind of a little bitch. He's kind of, right? You can see his dad wasn't around, kind of thing. Right. And so he was now standing up for himself. And so you're supposed to kind of follow the same thing. But yeah, this is not mom moving into a new town. This is me smoking crack and going to Cook County jail and robbing people. And right. This is not the same. But yet there's so much lessons to be found in it that parallel to self-development that you couldn't get from reading a book by an award-winning #1 best-selling author. The experience that life has unfolded to people like you or myself or a dozen other martial artists out there who have lived that violent life to come back and be able to speak on it. And you'll find that these people like myself, like my friend Lee Morrison, like you just want to help people.
Yeah.
People like yourself. I was watching one of your jiu-jitsu classes and I was watching the smile on all the faces of the kids, right? They all had little white belts on. They didn't care. They didn't care. In that space, everything was okay, man.
That's right.
For some kids, that's all they have.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I try to be mindful of that. Now, going back towards your martial arts history, Taekwondo, we both got started in Taekwondo. Was it WTF or ITF style? Do you remember?
ATF.
ATF. Okay.
American Taekwondo.
Okay. Is that the Junri organization or
this? My instructor, Master No, was an Olympian champion in Korea.
Okay.
He came over, and it became. I'll be honest with you, it was a Taekwondo school, but it was like we had tournaments, but it seemed like they had their own circle of business people.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean.
As a student looking up, now that I have a business, right? Looking at him as a business guy, as a student, there was guys trying to get into sparring federations and do this and work their way up, that kind of thing. And my guys seemed to be more about like getting them internally trying to develop their own thing, So I went to other tournaments and watched people spar. I didn't do a lot of tournament fighting until kickboxing. Until I got out of Taekwondo and kickboxing.
And how did you transition? Was that your next step, Taekwondo to kickboxing?
Yeah, well, I did Ishinru, Taekwondo, Aikido, Hapkido, Hakaru Jiu-Jitsu. I did all these various traditional martial arts, Kempo, some Kung Fu, and
That's a
then I
lot.
do kickboxing through a JKD concept group.
Okay, was that in Chicago? The
Yeah, yeah,
JKD? Who
yeah,
was
yeah.
the head? Who was the head of that at that time?
We just had a couple guys who had started doing JKD, who were Ishinru guys, went into kickboxing. They were on the path like me, and
Hmm.
so up their own school. We had guys like Fred Degerberger up in Degerberger Academy in Chicago. Fred Degerberg in Chicago. That's a Danny kind of. That's what Danny Nasano would go all the time. And so, and then we had Dan Ricardo. He was Paul's resource for us. And
Okay.
so we'd have this kickboxing camp, and then Dion would come out and feed us the JKD PFS rat, right? And so that was our main line. And then once we got enough of him, I went to Tom, I went to Paul, and for about 25 years. And Paul was very much like Mike, hey, go do Wing Chun. Hey, Mike, go do cage fighting, right?
He sent you out.
Yes, yes, very JKD-ish. He did that to my friend Tom Cruise. He said go do jujitsu. He found Marcel Luzado and trained under him, got his black belt under him, and he did the same thing with me with MMA. Like there wasn't people in PFS doing MMA. they were doing JKD, and he was like, "Mike, go do this cage fighting. Let's figure it out."
So then you hop into cage fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Your first cage fight. What was
Mm-hmm.
that like?
Cut off shorts and Kempo gloves.
So this is early 90s and mid 90s?
Yes, sir.
Kempo gloves, the big, so people don't know, that's what Bruce Lee wore in Enter the Dragon, the big
Yeah,
black
where they tie
gloves.
that thing. Yeah,
Yeah, you tie, yeah. It's there. I told my wife I want a pair just to like put on the shelf back here.
yeah, hang them on the wall, nostalgia.
Yeah, exactly, just to look cool. But I bet those things are hard as a rock to get hit with.
Yeah, I
They
mean
don't
they were
look soft.
the first MMA glove.
Hmm.
They were the first. They were called Kempo gloves. They're the first MMA glove. So I got to give credit where credit's due. Go ahead, Kempo, 19, right? And cut off shorts and no rounds.
No, this is before rounds. So
Yes, this was before rounds. So my
was
last
it
my
was it on a reservation or was it like a legit?
no, it was a legit. We opened up. It was a baseball facility that we held. That we had been. They had been promoters. This group of guys had been promoters of kickboxing the whole
Hmm.
time. Kickboxing matches, right? So they had the ring, they had all the things. It was just a boxing ring. And the UFC had come out, and within 2 years we were doing it, but you couldn't elbow certain things were illegal, right?
Was it here in Texas? I used to go to fights back then, and it was probably until early 2000s. It was pancrase rules. You had to open hand strike. You couldn't elbow. Was it pancrase rules or
No,
something of that effect?
even before that,
Mm.
because you didn't even know about pancration at that time. That was a thing that you only got lucky for because of cable turned you in, right? So a 10 to 12 years difference in that technology base went from no internet to Windows to internet, like within 10 to 12 years. And so all of a sudden you could just go online and get a video. You didn't have to fly out to California. We had to fly out to Valley or just keep rewinding the VHS tape until it went and didn't work. And so in the cage fighting time, there was guys on the side, or you could hear it in the announcement when you watch the old tape of my fight. You can hear it. You can kickbox and do wrestling. Like they didn't know what to say, right? They're like, "What is this? You could." They were kind of shocked by the things we were doing. These are people who were used to coaching or calling boxing matches and
Yeah.
kickboxing matches, and all of a sudden this guy get picked up and slammed, and nobody's hitting a bell. And wait, that guy you can do that? You can kick him
They
And
would
so,
stand guys up when they were grappling. You know what I mean? They used to stand guys up when they were
no,
grappling.
no, they let us. I won that fight with a leg lock.
Hmm.
Yep. And I had tried it first in the first, and I didn't remember when you watched the video. I had tried it first at the beginning of the fight, and at the end of the fight, I won it with a leg lock, but it took me 13 some odd minutes to get it. You know what I mean? I wound up fighting on the same card later as Matt Hughes. Pat Miletich refed our fight. He's a cool dude. I still chat with him now and then.
This up in that neck of the woods, there was the hook and shoot organization.
Mm,
Is that who you were fighting for at that time or no?
No, a guy named Bob Shermer was hosting some fight. He was coaching me. He's out of Combat Dough in Chicago. He's an old school like legend. And a guy named Joe Goitia, Goitia Martial Arts in Chicago. He's another JKD guy. He was holding on fights. I think it was one of his fights, promotion at Madonna High School. We just signed up to fight. That was Matt Hughes' fight. That's the fight that Pat Miletich took Matt Hughes to the UFC. It was at Madonna High School. I fought the third fight on the card. He fought the first. I think he fought the first one. It was amazing. Matt Hughes was a fighter back in the day. But continued on that for a while. Fought on the same card as Dan Severin. That was Joe Goitia's fight. Joe Goitia. I forgot his fight challenger or something. His fight company. Anyway, it was because he sent me the thing not too long ago. The old, with our pictures on it.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
See Matt Hughes, me, a couple other people on the fight card. So those were the days. Those were fun. Obviously, the skill level was nothing compared to what it is now. It was just like, hey, open the door. You can kick, you can punch. You had guys from Gracie Academy going in there trying to take everybody down. You had kickboxers. You had wrestlers. It was a fun time to splice martial arts, right? Because you come out of martial arts and your instructor says, well, go do cage fighting. And so you go, okay, right? But why didn't you do martial arts? Where was your thing? Where was your move? Where was your death touch? Where did that go? What happened? It divided people, MMA. It was kind of like a cold glass of water on a hot day. It was refreshing. We're like, see, told you, right? You couldn't do this thing anymore. This thing wasn't working. Someone's going to go, pop, pop, and hit you with a double jab.
Go, no, they're just doing it wrong, man. They're just doing it wrong. That's what my instructors, because I believe I was still doing Taekwondo and, at that period of 93, 94. And I would ask my instructors, well, I just watched the UFC. What do you think about it? Oh, yeah, those Taekwondo guys in there, they're no good. They didn't do it right. You know what I mean? Was their answer.
Yeah. So I found it to be that there were three empirical principles that were avoided and got lost in stylistic adoration and loyalty. Jits for life. I get it. Right? I'm a boxer. Boxers are some bad dudes. I get why you want to be a boxer for your whole life. I get it. But I found that more importantly to the loyalty of the art, the system, and the style, more importantly, were three components. One was will. The other was skill. And the final one was drill. The will, the skill, and the drill were like the thing in Back to the Future. I put hyperflux drive or something.
Yeah, the flex capacitor.
Yeah, when you focus on all those together, and then you say, okay, well, I have to fill the will, the skill, and the drill. The will and the skill are going to give me the drill. The will, the skill, and the drill. And then the will, you have to ask people to find out. In order to have will, you have to have cause, commitment, confidence. Are you willing to fight, bro? Are you willing to? Do you have willpower? Right? Because you could have all the skill in the world, and somebody hits you and gets in your face and intimidates you. That's that street love that no one talks about. Right? Three hard-hitting dudes come up on you. What, punk? I'll jack you, boy. Say another word. Do it. I can hit you for no damn reason. Because the fuck I said so. Will. I don't have to have skill. The same of standing up for yourself versus knowing how to fight. If you stand up for yourself, it shows that you have will, that I believe that I am worth fighting for.
Yeah.
You're not going to trample over my rights, my feelings, or anything, or whatever you think your thing is. You're going to stand up for yourself. Now, if somebody calls your bluff, well, you're going to have to go to your deck, pull out some skill. What's your skill set? And it's a complement to your willpower. Because if you're not, you cannot be intense. Cannot. You're either thought-filled or rage-filled. Intensity is when your will and skill are equivalent. And only through proper drill sets can you achieve that. And so, if will carries the skill, right? I can say, well, I got a lot of will. Now I can go bench 500 pounds. It ain't happening, bro. Because for will to exist, you have to have confidence. Confidence is what? Remembered success.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't have confidence, it is supplemented with courage. Never done it, do it anyway, right? This is what you get when you have a good male role model in your house. Boy, I know you're afraid. So am I. I love you anyway. I'll meet you at the finish line. You got this, kid. Let's go. Yes? Right. And so when you have a good mentor, a good leader, you have someone leading you into that place where you can supplement confidence and courage, but you need cause. What am I fighting for? If I said, hey, Fury, we're going to go smoke this dude. Here's $20 to fight this guy. What's your investment? Not high, right? Hey, man, here's 20 grand. Did your willpower go up or down?
A lot.
Right. So your cause went up. What's your cause? First, preservation or pride? What's going to drive you the most to fight? Money, your pride, FU, or preservation? You're a grown-ass man. What are you fighting for? Right?
Yeah.
Preservation. So if you're going to fight for preservation, here's what you're willing to do. And here's what you're trained to do. Because if you're trained to do something you ain't willing to do, you will fail miserably. And regret will immerse your life about what you could have, should have, would have, and didn't do. And that is trained properly. You know what I mean? And so if you don't have the right amount of will, cause, confidence, commitment, you're not going to be committed. Hey, man, I remember hearing a story. Doesn't matter who told it, but he says, hey, I'm in London and these guys pull up. We're in line at this restaurant. These guys pull up in a Bugatti. They hop out. There's 3 deep and they're swole. They cut in line and some girl says something to her boyfriend. Her boyfriend tries to get hard. He gets knocked out. So does she. They take their food as well as their own and leave. And someone looks at my guy, the guy who's telling the story, who's a world champion kickboxer. And he says, why didn't you do something? He says, over some chips. Right. How committed are you going to be over some chips? You have your lady with you. You have your kids with you. Yes, I want to stand up for what's right. But at the same time, I don't want to be laying on the floor like either one of them. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying is different scenarios or the context that you find yourself confronted with violence will ask how committed, how confident you are to your cause. And do you have the skill to back it up?
Have you done the drills?
Yeah, the drills what? Bring out the mutual of the both. Developmental, situational, right? I'm either developing a skill or I'm applying it to a situation, which then brings you to realize that I just can't passively get through this randomly.
Yeah.
I have to be deliberate in my training, active, deliberately active, so I can flow and move accordingly.
Now, let me ask you this, because I feel with a lot of people, a lot of parents today, or even for themselves, it seems like they're not doing a martial arts consistently. My belief is they're betting on the fact they'll never need it. You know what I mean? Which to me, and where I come from, you and I come from, I think, different situations than a lot of the kids I teach now. I'm kind of in a area where I'm kind of on the border of some kids from the hood and some, adjacent to some nicer neighborhoods. So I get a blend of both. But it seems that even all parents, even the ones from the lower income areas, parents don't really look at martial arts. They look at it in the same way they would look at, volleyball, baseball, cheerleading. And they're hedging their bets that, I'll never really need it. Can you speak to that? And do you think that martial arts is a necessity for people today?
That's a good question. And it's a very relative question, because if you're looking to teach and you're trying to give back, I work in an addictive community, which is kind of like trying to help a drowning dog, right? It's saving your life, but I'm going to come out worse than when I went in. And when you're trying to help people, you have to first gauge their own level of understanding the probability of risk. And if you live in the community I live in now, we did have a very relatively calm community with very low risk probability of violence. People moved away from certain counties and states and areas and came here. So trying to convince people that there's a high likelihood that they will encounter what they left diminishes with their surroundings. Now, it's unfortunate to hear that even people from the hood, and a lot of times it's just mothers trying to go, hey, let's get into something fun. Let's not get free stuff. And so they're really trying to not negate it, but they're trying to say, let's put our focus on that's off the street life, and fighting is the street life. And hopefully you can have some fun doing self-defense. And problematically across the board, Fury, I believe it's like this. Very simple. People view martial arts as a luxury, not a life skill.
Mm-hmm.
Learning to defend yourself is a life skill, and it's up to us as owners and proprietors of business, as well as people who have been where we're at, to say, listen, I'm telling my story not because I want your kids to use drugs or be around drugs, but I'm telling a story to expand the awareness of what's happening out there. The people who can't get their drugs are coming to your neighborhood to get the money to go get the drugs, because that's what I did. I robbed you, and you, good sir, so I could get high, and I boosted, and I did all the things. And if you don't see the necessity, so 2 months ago, an illegal immigrant stabbed a girl in town. Yet and still, regardless of the conditions or the whatever of the situation, the town was all in frenzy of concern. I very rapidly put up knife defense course. Let's go, sign up. Oh, but, right? You know the deal, right? Crickets. And unfortunately, human nature, brother, you know what I mean? It's unfortunate. In business, you realize you can't get people off the couch. You have to find the people who are looking for you. There are people looking for you. You have to find them, because there's this a category where people go, I need it, but I'm already going to the gym. And well, my dad's got a gun and I work out. That's right. It's the same, right? I should be no.
So they get punched at the club.
Not even at the club, bro. Not even at the club. And that's one of the things. And I know people use that example. Are you married, sir? I've seen a ring on your finger. So
yes, sir. Mm-hmm. No children.
How often do you go to the club?
Never.
Okay. How often do you think the people who train with you go to the club?
They're a little younger, but probably rarely.
So here's my point. Most people who come to you aren't up in the club. The violence they face is the parking space. It's the looking at your daughter too long. It's the off-beat stuff. Everybody in our business always equates self-defense with the drunk guy who's at the bar at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
I usually answer for that with all due respect, but if you're always doing that, you're not saying much for either him or you. Because A, you're always at the bar at 2 a.m, which doesn't say much for you, or B, you're fighting a drunk dude at 2 a.m. in a bar, which doesn't say much for you. So equate violence with what the people who are walking in your door equate it with. And that is being robbed, being held up. Wow, I'm with my kids. Holy cow, what do I do? Right? Because there's someone who wants the most out of somebody. If I rob you with your kids, I know you will capitulate to my demands for the safety of your children. Yep. This, especially if I disorientate them, come up fucking hard and fast. Yeah. And so when you share this with those people, they realize that martial arts isn't a luxury, it's a life skill. But kids are a reoccurring investment. In other words, people keep having them. And kids are going through baseball and this, instead of bitching about, hey, well, you know what? My martial arts class does more for your kid's life than a slap shot. This may be true, but they don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
See you at the hockey game rooting for their kid as their martial arts. Look, Coach Mike here. Where do you think they're going in the off season, Fury? Where do you think?
Here, yeah.
That's right. Or I can stand up and say, make me your whole year round thing. How many things, do kids get into? I wasn't that the way because we didn't have that kind of money or resource to bust me around from game to game or whatever.
Yeah.
Right? Martial arts was a place I could walk to if mom wasn't around. So when you replace, and the way you do that is hold adult-centered problem-solving courses at your school. Fight your weapon. How do you get to your weapon? Yeah, I have a weapon, but how do you get to it when someone's hitting you? Do you take the hit and get the weapon? Or do you get hit while you're drawing the weapon and they get the weapon? How did you figure this out? Right? And go through these kind of courses where people can go, wow, that's a very valuable life skill to have. And I didn't have to invest 6 years to get it. this is the problematic with martial arts, is I'm giving people solutions that are dining solutions for 6 or 7 years. Well, you'll learn that once you get that belt, and you'll learn this once you get that. But right now, just go along with it, and you get all these things, and people are like, well, kind of needed this like yesterday. And I know it's not very good foresight on my part, but the demand of the public is swipe left, swipe left, swipe left. And so you got to keep that attention. Tell somebody, listen, I have a 90-minute course. I have a 15-hour course. I have a 10-hour course. If you're only riding in one lane as a business owner, you'll never satisfy the vast masses needs. You only appease the kids' need of keeping them occupied. Yeah. You know, then you got to say, well, how many people are I've been open 6 years. I have 3 black belts, right? Or the equivalent of, right? So it's taken that long, 6 years to get people, but only 3 of them, because it only shows you the percentage, 30%. Stick with it enough and high enough. And so you have to have a supplementary income as well as an arm to reach and inform those who are uninformed about self-protection and what it means to their life, to look at them and go, listen, I normally do mostly for what my kids want because I'm used to sacrificing for my children. But I know that, like the stewardess, I'm supposed to take care of myself. So I can't defend myself. How am I going to defend my kids? And isn't defending my kids being able to defend myself? Because if they get through me, who's going to help them?
That's right.
Right. So when you open people's eyes to this reality, and I hope we never need it. I think it's better to have it and not need it than it is to need it and not have it. And so when we speak this language to adults, say, listen, you can bring your kids in here for 3 months. I got this thing, man, you look right for it. Next Saturday, we're having a 2-hour thing on the importance of firearms in the home and how to use adjunct weapons in the kitchen. Right. Now you get to open that lane for drive-through. And Susie brought a friend who now has an 8-year-old. So now you're helping the whole family. I have families that train here.
Yeah.
Adult classes, teen classes, kids classes, you know, because they offer solutions, because problems are different for kids than they are for adults. Bullies are different than robbers, are different than rapists, are different than addicts, you know?
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Your methodology, your system, so to speak, how does it differ from Paul Vunek's system, the rapid assault tactics system? And can you speak on what you teach and how you teach it?
Sure. Again, Paul Vunek's is a rat system. It's intercept, destroy, straight blast, headbutt, knee, and elbow. It feeds off the pressure, pressure, pain, terminate. Right? Acquire pain, apply pressure, put more pain, or terminate. And it's a really freaking, you know this, man. I mean, when people say, what you do on the street, that, the simple, yep, that was it. And to be honest with you, back then when I was on the streets, that thigh kick was always landing for me. But here's the difference. Vu and JKD teach southpaw. Everybody in JKD is a right leader. Why? Because Bruce did.
Straight right, yeah. The right lead, I should say.
I don't understand the JKD community anymore. I did when I was in it. I'm kind of an exile from the JKD community, although it's my bloodline, it's my roots. It's Bunak, Danny, Paul, or Bruce, all the things. This is my line of lineage and training. But JKD says by its own principles, JKD doesn't come first. The thinking comes first. The thinking of having experience. Use what's useful. Disregard what's useless. Make it essentially your own. This is the process that leads to JKD, not the other way around. Correct?
Correct.
Okay, correct. So that means if you don't have an experience, what are you drawing upon? Bruce's experience. Right. So you look like a theater copycat.
Yeah.
You're not doing JKD. You're doing Bruce Lee's. You're doing imitating somebody. Imitating somebody is not doing JKD. Right? Bruce found that. I found that. My personal experience says 86% of people are right-handed and conventionally fight. Now, you will run a few, especially thug dudes who fight right lead, right? But what I found is I was always in a mismatched lead because I was always in a right lead in street fights. And it took me a minute to get to that switch to move, to take advantage of it. But I did things differently in terms of just saying, hey, whatever I'm doing in JKD, I should be able to do both sides. I want to match the lead that's given to me, if there is a lead at all in the fight. One of the other things I do differently is headbutt. I headbutt differently. I don't headbutt looking down, because the minute I did that in a real fight, that dude's hands came up. The minute you grab someone's hand, their hands come up in the middle to break that. And so I wound up running into the punch. Right, I got my face jacked up. I won the fight, headbutted the dude, but I got my face jacked up in the process. Learning curves, you know? But that's the experience I'm speaking of. Nobody's out there having their own experience. Now, whether it was bad decisions or it was because I ran security for so many years in Chicago and on the South Side and being white, it's just, right? Maybe that's what did it. But I had an experience and I was able to draw from. And so many people, and they're good guys, bro. They're just martial artists and they caught a habit and they became a teacher and they got certified and now they're doing it. Good for you. But you look just like Bruce. And then you're telling me that if I don't do what Bruce did in 1968 or whatever, then I'm not doing what? I don't understand this thinking. It's the opposite of what Bruce wrote. It's opposite. He was writing the conclusions of this process. He wasn't saying to duplicate it. He was saying have the same process, what you come up with. This is why it's the individual. It's more important than the system or style, because it's your experience that leads you to the process, as long as the process is the same. But if you fail to have the experience, everything you say is a dry land swimmer. Ish. I'm not trying to be insulting. And it may work for you and your guys in the school, right? But when you're facing a non-compliant opponent who doesn't want to go to jail, right, and is trying to get through you, it's a different story, man.
No, you said
everybody's got a plan until they get hit.
Yeah, absolutely.
You should get that experience real quick. You ain't never been knocked out or choked out. You should go grab that experience real quick.
I wanted to ask you quickly. You said something that caught my ear. It sounded like Van Damme from Lionheart. You said you fought on the streets professionally. Did you fight on the streets for money?
Yes, sir. I was a crackhead. So every crack dealer's got a guy.
So every crack dealer has a guy who's like his hitter?
No. He's got a guy who'll fight crackhead for money.
Okay, yeah.
Look, man, you know how easy it is to take somebody from the hood and get him to fight a crackhead for a nickel?
And what was your end? What would you get? They'd pay you in crack or what?
Nah, man, I get the money. But I got to give my front guy, the guy who I call to front me the money, I got to give him the nickel back plus half my winning. So the nickel he fronts me, I got to give that back to him when I win. And I win the nickel, I got to give him half. So he shows up for 15 minutes, makes $250. Yeah? I take the other $250, I spend $200 in crack, $50 on a room.
Bada boom, bada bing, huh?
See you next week, baby.
How many books do you have? Because it seems like you should also have a movie about your life.
That's funny. I have one book, yes. The second one's in writing, in process.
Where can people get the book?
Amazon, War Room. This is the War Room is a culmination of all these years of martial arts fighting. There's no stories of wonder, drunkenness, and this is like Tony Stark, just mathematics to the point. This is what we do. This is how you get better. You know, I also have lots of videos on YouTube as well as for sale on my website, focuscounterviolence.com.
And I would be remiss to let you go if I didn't. I usually ask people at the end of the podcast, hey, do you have a funny or interesting story you could tell? You trained with Paul Vunak. So that goes without saying, you've got at least a funny or interesting story. Anyone who's spent any time with Paul Vunak's got an interesting story, but you don't have to tell that story. But if you've got any funny or interesting things that happened to you along your journey in martial arts.
Yeah, I was doing I got quite a few stories, actually. I was training with, doing a Vunak seminar with a guy named Singh. And Harinder Singh? Yeah, me and Singh were doing a seminar.
He's in my movie. He's in Lion Killer. Check it out. Yes, sir. He plays the role of the master, basically, the deceased master. It was perfect for him, yeah.
And he wears the garb, everything. He is a martial arts master for sure. He fits that role. Yeah, so we were doing a seminar where we're training, boom, boom, boom. We're doing live blade training, right? Live blade training. And when you're training, you're just training. And so he goes up and I hit him with an oblique kick. And as I pull it back, he cuts me with it. Yeah?
Yeah.
So we're doing live blade training. He didn't expect the foot to come out. Neither did I. We're just training. I hit him, but he cuts me because we're knife guys. This is what we do, right? So he cut anything that comes at him. He's just doing this little thing, right? And so as soon as I go oblique kick, he pulls back cuts. Man, I needed some stitches, bro. That was a good cut. That was I got a couple blade stories like that. I was working a bar and come out to empty trash. This guy had kicked out earlier. They were heroin dudes. They had come back, and this dude went and got a kitchen knife, bro. Came at me with a kitchen knife, and I go to pull my blade. I had a cold steel folder, right?
Yeah.
And back in the day, cold steel was everything. And I opened up my blade, and I go to open it, and it falls out of my hand, bro, with the opening motion, you know? And anybody who knows works folders knows that you open it and do your thing. And so I draw it, and I'm in good time. But once I drop it, I don't have time to pick it up, right? I'm getting stuck.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's out of the joint. And I know him from the streets. He just got out the joint. And that's what he's saying. That's what he's saying is he's walking towards me. I still have better bitches than you in the joint. Like, this dude ain't playing, right? And so he comes at me. So I back out and I hit his hand and I hit him with a cross at the same time. Right? I pop, it hit him. He dropped instantly. And that's funny because that same day, me and Harinder Singh were running a drill where he throws a knife. And he wants to race me for the knife. This is the first time I've ever done it with him. So we're halfway there, and I shove him into a bunch of chairs and walk around.
That's JKD, everybody.
Next time you talk to Singh, ask him about that seminar in Highland Park, Illinois. He came out, we partied and hang out, and it was fun. It was
absolutely
fun. Every time he cut me, put some stitches in me, it was fun.
And the motion you did, just checking the blade, hitting. I mean, it's the same motion with from the FMA, right? From the sticks, yes. It's the exact same.
Yeah, normally you cut the hand, but there's a drill where you go tap for knife, tap, cut, cut. And so all I did was use the other, not hand.
Bang.
The hand normally had the blade. I had to back out because he was stabbing me in my gut.
Yeah. It
was just a hit and came over the top. And now I got a lucky. I don't know if it was a lucky punch, but I stuck him good. He dropped immediately.
Well, man,
I got on him for a sec too.
You what? You got on him for a second?
Yeah. I got it. Even the police said something to me about it, I was like, hey.
I feel like you've got a ton of stories to tell. And seriously, man, I think you got a couple books, maybe think about writing a script encapsulating your life story. I think that'd be a very fascinating, interesting, and important story to tell. You're
the movie guy. We can talk about it at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. Heck yeah, man. Well, man, I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
If you're ever in the Houston area or I'm ever around your way, hopefully we can get together.
Hey, I want to hear your story at some point too. I want to hear more about your story and what you've done with it. And I see your kids and you're doing good things, man. I appreciate you having me on. Keep up the good work, brother. Keep doing your thing. Keep giving back and showing love, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you, sir. God bless.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
And another episode of FURYCAST is in the books. I want to give a big shout out to Michael VanBeek for coming on the show today, sharing his story with us. If you want to reach out to him, connect with him, train with him, get one of his books, his links are in the description. You can also follow my new graphic novel, The Gentleman's Guild. Yes, I'm making a graphic novel. It's called The Gentleman's Guild with artist E. Canales. You can sign up for the mailing list now. The link for that is also in the description. And don't forget to watch Lion Killer, my debut feature film. That's right, I made a movie. It's called Lion Killer. It stars Regina Ting-Chen, who's currently on season 4 of Stranger Things. You can watch it at Amazon Prime, Tubi TV, Freevee, the Roku channel. There's even a full Spanish dub. And as always, don't forget to like this video. Help me boost the algorithm by commenting down below. You can also subscribe to the channel. And yes, even smash the bell so you can be notified every time I drop a new FURYCAST video. This is Derrick Fury. Until next time, peace.